Good evening, everyone. Welcome to today's Quantum Mutual Funds webinar. My name is Sandeep Bhosle. I will be hosting the session today. The topic for today is how do you invest in a bull run, where to from here. I would like to begin by introducing you to our speaker, Mr. Nilesh Shetty, Fund Manager Equities. Before we begin the session, I would like to request you to all plug in the earphones for an optimal listening experience. We will have a presentation for around 20-25 minutes of time. You can post your questions in the chat box or in the Q&A box. We will take all the questions at the end of the presentation. Yeah. So I would like to introduce Mr. Nilesh Shetty. Nilesh has been with us for around 10 years of time. He's the fund manager for equities. He will be taking us to the presentation. Over to you, Nilesh.
Thank you so much, Sandeep. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on today's webinar. My name is Nilesh Shetty. I'm the co-fund manager for the Quantum Long-Term Equity Fund. And I know this topic for today is sort of top of the mind for all investors. Given the rally that we've had, where is the market headed and how do you plan your investments? So hopefully I'll try and answer some of your questions today. So I'll just kick off the presentation. So right, this is sort of where we stand today. Nobody would have thought at the end of March 2020 that we would have had such a strong rally. The small and mid caps, which were essentially in a bear run much before COVID hit for almost 3 years, have essentially even taken off much higher. So it's been fairly surprising for most people, given that we have had first and second wave and the economy per se has taken a big hit. Why is it that the market is in a raging bull run? So hopefully I'll try and answer the questions today. I'll try and break it up into two sections. One is what is happening on the corporate profitability side. The second is what is happening on the flow side. So eventually all market levels are a function of just two things. Corporate profitability and the valuation that you give, which is driven by flows. So let's look at what is happening to each of these two variables and figure out what is happening to the market overall. Just to figure out how the market has behaved, 2020, it was primarily a flight to safety. People were just flocking to sectors which they thought would be least impacted, which was primarily healthcare and IT, which gave the strongest returns. And then 2021, you had a play on recovery where people started saying there is a big rebound in demand. There is going to be a good recovery going forward on the upside. And so we rather play on sectors which are going to do well as the economy opens up. So you had metals, PSU stocks, which are deep value, and by and large, generally sectors which were exposed to the unlock theme, they've done well by TD. This is sort of how the psychology of the market has moved over the last 18 months. What has been fairly surprising is this chart, where especially in financial year 21, despite the first wave and the stringent lockdown we had in Q1 of last year, especially April, May of 2020, corporate India ended up posting record profits in that year. And it's fairly surprising as to why that has happened. And I'll try and answer that later on. But the rally per se has some fundamental basis. Earnings have been fairly surprising on the upside. And most companies have reported record margins as well as strong earnings, strong revenue growth for FY21. And if you remember, so the India before COVID, you had consistent periods of very low growth. So 2003 to 2012, India had this massive capex boom, where you've had an infrastructure-led development funded by debt primarily, and a lot of these assets turned bad. So 2003 to 2020, banks were just cleaning up the mess that was happening on the NPA side, because of which the provisioning numbers were higher and consensus earnings number were repressed as the banks kept on providing more and more, and the earnings estimate, whichever analyst had, they had to keep on cutting. Apart from that, of course, you had this, especially if you remember the period of UPA 2, at the fag end of that government, you had this massive corruption scandal, which led to a complete freeze of approvals and permissions for projects, which had a cascading impact on new projects coming up, as well as corporates' ability to set up new projects. So you had an economic slowdown triggered by rising NPA levels in the banking sector, as well as government inactivity, and essentially you had almost 6-7 years of very, very poor earnings growth. You had a big cut in earnings because of COVID, but surprisingly in a COVID year, you started seeing upgrade of numbers happening. So after a very long time, FY 21, 22, 23 numbers were starting getting upgraded, which was the opposite of what we saw in the years before that. You have to understand the way India was positioned after 6-7 years of very weak economic growth. We were anyway at the cusp of an economic revival. The banking sector had been cleaned up. The corporate balance sheets had been cleaned up. So you would have had a natural upcycle anyway. Perhaps demonetization and GST deferred that corporate upcycle. But it looks like after we hit a bottom for COVID, that is sort of where the economic bottom has been hit. And you will probably have an uptrend in economic activity, barring any third wave or other sort of events related to COVID. But it looks like going forward, you will have economic earnings much better than what we had over the last 4-5 years. And the reason that corporate profitability hit a record in a year where you had very stringent lockdowns is this. By and large, the listed companies represent the organized space or the larger space of companies, not the mom and pop stores that you see or the unorganized sector. Because of events like demonetization, GST, and COVID, you had corporate India or the listed space benefiting or doing a lot better than the unlisted space. In events like demonetization, of course, the unlisted space or the informal space primarily works on cash. They could not do their transactions, while the formal space continued to do their transactions because they work on credit cards and internet banking and other avenues. Plus, they had access to funding which the informal space did not have. In that environment, banks just withdrew funding for the places where they thought they were higher risk. So listed space continued to do well. Even in COVID, because the larger companies had much better firepower and much better ability to fund their vendors and manage logistics, they have done a lot better. So it's not that overall the economy has done well, but the listed space has done well. And in the end, when you're buying into equities from the stock exchanges, you're buying that formal listed space which has done well, which is one of the primary reasons where corporate profitability has been able to hit a record. Where we stand today on the economy, by and large, you've had a normalized economy now. After the second wave, most indicators are getting to where they were pre-COVID. So if you compare them to Feb 2020, they're by and large back to those levels. It's not that we are reporting strong growth, but by and large, at least corporate India is back to the levels that they were pre-COVID. So at an economy level, barring a third wave and other shocks, you should see an improved economic activity going forward. Now, if the economy is going to recover, what are the major risks that we face right now? The number one risk is, of course, a third wave. If it hits again, you have lockdowns and economic activity getting deferred. Given that the number or the percentage of people who've had 2 doses is still just under 10%, and you are heading into the festive season now as the Ganesh festival will start in September, and people moving around increases, just the probability of a third wave hitting in India is high. You have low vaccine coverage and higher commingling of people. Second is, of course, job losses have been fairly high, despite record profitability in corporate India. And given that, again, their impact on consumer discretionary spend will be felt going forward at some point in time. So, and of course, rising raw material prices. We've had periods where commodity prices have gone up by 100%, 150%. Of course, for commodity producers, it's good. The steel companies, aluminum companies, they will report record profits. But for the buyers of these companies, of course, you will see their gross margins getting hit, especially if demand doesn't pick up the way people think it will. They still don't have enough pricing power to be able to pass on all the price increases. These are the sort of broad primary risks on the fundamental side. The way we are thinking is the economy, by and large, is normalized before COVID. Corporate India, especially the listed space, is in a much better position than they were before COVID. And so their numbers should reflect the better market share that they have. And the economy, by and large, should recover and get back to a higher growth trajectory than what we've seen over the last 4-5 years. The other variable, let's look at what's happening to the flows. So, of course, last year, calendar year 20, we had record flows from FIIs. 2 very good years, CY 19 and 20. This year has been fairly average, not that flows have been at a record. Local activity, of course, domestic investors have used the rally to book profits. Even YTD numbers are not that great, but July numbers have been fairly robust. As the second year started ebbing, you saw a lot of money coming into the local mutual funds. But at least the YTD numbers doesn't suggest the market should be on a rampaging bull market. visually, the flows have been a lot lower this calendar year than they have been historically. So what is the reason the markets are doing what they're doing? They're going on a massive uptrend. The only reason that we could figure out, and perhaps this is global in nature, not unique to India, is this: just the share of individual investors trading in the market is at a record. And you have smartphone-based apps who have made it very easy for people to trade. People are sitting at home and working from home. And just the incremental savings that people who have not gone out to restaurants or not taken holidays, that money is being routed to stock markets. And of course, trailing returns, given the way they are going up fairly rapidly, that is attracting even more players. And our sense is this is the major reason that you're seeing a significant inflow in the market, and you're seeing sort of expansion in price to earning multiples, which is the retail investors sitting at home and pumping money directly in the market. And you're seeing signs of some fraud emerging. The kind of oversubscription that you're seeing in the IPO market, the number of IPOs coming in, they're all indicative of very active retail investor participation. Perhaps that is the number one reason you're seeing such a significant rally in the market. Of course, all that rally means that price to earnings ratio look very rich. The way this is a trailing 12-month number, so you have to be careful because you had an impact of the first wave and the second wave baked into these numbers. But still, markets are much above their long-term averages. Of course, if people who sort of been in the market in 2003-4, they've seen the cycle as well. When the market or the economic cycle turns and the markets start factoring 3-4 years of solid growth ahead, the market valuations on a trailing earnings basis will start looking very expensive. And you will just have to bear with it, because unless earnings growth starts stagnating or falling in an environment of easy liquidity and rising earnings, it's unlikely PE valuations will fall. It will remain fairly rich. You are again seeing a very similar phenomena in the mid and small and mid cap space. I showed you in the first chart the vertical takeoff that has happened there. Again, valuations are fairly rich there, and at least internally we think there is some element of froth there. You have to be really careful because it's not a bucket where you have great management quality, barring few, and liquidity can disappear overnight. So at least in that space, we are slightly skeptical whether they'll be able to deliver on the high expectations that the price to earnings ratios are setting for them. So if you think of scenarios that can play out, you could have by and large rising corporate profitability or falling corporate profitability. And on the liquidity side, you could have easy liquidity or tight liquidity. These are the two primary variables determining market levels. By and large, our bet is on scenario one. We think over the next 3-4 years, you will have fairly strong corporate earnings growth. And it is highly unlikely that central bankers are going to tighten liquidity despite rising inflation. I think they want to get the economic cycle going, especially in India. So they might have suppressed rates for a while. You might have marginal increases, but still interest rates will be a lot lower than you've seen over the last 5-6 years. So in that environment, we think equity valuations will remain high. That means price to earnings ratio will remain high. And equity will remain positive. You will not get the kind of returns that you saw over the last 18 months because you went from a very cheap market to a fairly richly valued market. But by and large, if earnings continue to rise, especially in double digits, and liquidity is easy, you should expect equity returns to be positive. They might trend from sort of mid-single digits to early teens kind of number, but that is the kind of return expectations perhaps you should set over the next sort of 2-3 years annual CAGR. But at least our internal bet is you will have corporate earnings which will be rising and liquidity which will be easy, and market returns which will be positive. In terms of earnings, of course, last 4-5 years has been stressful, but over a longer term, there has been 10x growth in earnings. Next 2 years, earnings growth expectation is fairly robust. Again, this is driven by banking system NPAs being cleaned up. And as they normalize their numbers and they don't have to provide for NPAs, you see a large delta coming in their numbers. But even if there is some increase in NPA because of COVID, I think numbers will remain fairly strong. So if you look at a longer term picture, I think corporate earnings has grown at a fairly strong pace of 10x. And there's no reason over the next sort of decade and 15 years, earnings growth will not at least track the nominal GDP growth, which could be in the range of 12 to 15% for India. You could expect 6 to 7% of real GDP growth and then perhaps 5% of inflation. So just the nominal GDP growth will sort of compound at 12-13%. And it's highly unlikely the earnings growth of companies will not compound at that rate as well. So as a portfolio manager, what we are doing, or at least what we're trying to do is, of course, we are value guys. So we try and build a portfolio which we think reflects value. And in our environment, if things don't turn out that well, it should also defend us if the markets were to fall. So if you look at our price to earnings ratio 2 year out compared to the Sensex price to earnings ratio, it's a lot lower because our companies are much sensibly valued. Again, this is consensus earnings. This is not our earnings on our companies. Our earnings could be different, but this is consensus earnings, analyst earnings for our companies, what they forecasted 2 years out. And if you take that and value the portfolio, this is the valuation that you get. A lot comfortable price to earnings growth ratio, or PEG ratio as they're called. And so that is all you can do. You can try and build a portfolio which you think will do well over the next few years, as well as defend you in the market if it were to fall. In terms of strategy for investors, I mean, we've always had just one long-term strategy, which is an all-weather strategy, irrespective of market cycles. You put away your emergency corpus first, which is about 6 months to 24 months of expenses based on what kind of risk profile you have. You don't want to touch your investments in times of stress. There could always be periods like last year's March where markets just tank. If you have to pull out your investments at that point in time, it will hurt. So you want to keep your investments away, especially equity investments, and not touch them for 10 years, 15 years. Once you put your emergency corpus away, out of the balance that is left, you put 85% in 4-5 diversified mutual funds or direct equity if you can invest in direct equity and understand stocks. And the balance you invest in a small portion of that, 15 to 20% in gold. The reason that we've always advocated investing in gold is because in times of stress, it tends to do a lot better. It tends to act as a insurance for your portfolio. You should be investing in gold and hoping that gold does not do well. That means the other 85% of your portfolio is doing well. If gold is doing well, that means the other 85% is under stress. But in times of stress, just the returns that you get in gold will give you some sort of protection. You should not be investing in gold for returns. So in terms of the quantum family, what we have for that strategy is, of course, we have the 12-80-20 strategy. You put away your 12 months of expenditure away, and the balance 80% you invest in equity. So the 80% split is, of course, put 70% in fund of funds, which is a basket of now almost 7 mutual funds. And you get an exposure to all kinds of different funds, which is being curated and selected specifically based on risk return profiles and where the fund manager thinks it will do well over the next sort of 8 years, 10 years. Put 15% into quantum long-term equity value fund. I know people like that fund, and most of the investors today are from that fund. But no matter how you like, you could always have had periods like 2017, 18, 19, where we underperformed by a very large margin because the kind of stocks we were holding, the market did not appreciate that. They wanted frothy names and we were not holding them. Last 18 months has been a lot better for us. We've done value style has come back in vogue. But just to get away from that style bias, you should not be holding more than 15-20% in that one fund. The other 15% you can put in the ESG fund. Again, it's a fund with a great track record since we launched it. But because the track record is still short, we still don't advocate a larger allocation. So if you want to invest in a fund as well as be sort of clear about your conscience where these companies are not polluting the environment and are great in corporate governance, not look at valuations, which is where what the value team does. We look at valuations and invest. They don't look at valuations, they just look at the ESG score. This simple allocation will take care of all the market cycles and any kind of market environment that you are facing. For people who also have a heart and would like to allocate money or a portion of their money to NGOs, we have the SMILE allocation where you could decide which NGO you want to invest in, and a corpus could be allocated to that particular NGO, and these are curated by Help Your NGO. That's sort of the end of my presentation. I'm happy to take questions. Sandeep, you can open the floor.
Thanks, Nilesh, for that quick and short presentation. We have some questions. Some questions we had received earlier before starting the presentation, and some right now when you were giving this presentation. So this is from Mr. Dipankar Jha. He wants to know whether he has missed the bus. Everyone thinks that the markets are right now. I think you're covering the second slide also. Can you just throw some light on that?
Yeah, I mean, I remember 2009-10, you had a very similar rally, and people thought, oh my God, have I missed the bus? Sitting here today, when you look at the peaks of that market, I think it was just about 20,000 or something for the index, Sensex. So now sitting, if your time horizon is long term, these peaks don't matter. I think markets will continue to make high because the basic assumption is companies in India are still not that big. They will continue to grow. And if the corporate earnings are growing, the share price will continue to grow and the portfolio will continue to grow. So unless you have a time horizon of next 1 year or 18 months, I'd ask you to be careful. But if you're investing for next 10 years or 15 years, I don't think you should worry about market levels. What you should do, perhaps you might want to stagger your investments a bit. Instead of putting entire 100% in one go, perhaps you start with 75% now, and the balance, if the market were to crack or something, you allocate the other balance 25%. But if you're doing an SIP or starting an SIP, it really doesn't matter. I think over 10 years time, even this peak might look not that significant for us.
Nilesh, how do you see our quantum long-term equity fund performing in the next 5 years of time? This is from Mr. Vinay.
Yeah, I mean, Quantum Long-Term Equity Fund had a great track record from 2006 to 2016. If you look at that 10-year track record, perhaps you are the top 5 across categories, across the type of schemes. 2017 onwards, there was a big disconnect which we started observing in the market, where the underlying economy was faltering, but the market kept on rallying, driven by a lot of factors, including flows. And the kind of companies that we thought was value, market did not appreciate that. They wanted slightly riskier names, and it was a very concentrated rally driven by select stocks, which we did not have in the portfolio. If that kind of market comes back, we will not do well. By and large, we have a diversified portfolio linked to the economic cycle, where we think companies who are sort of serving consumer needs will do well. But if it's a very concentrated rally with very select stocks doing well, some of them having corporate governance issues, we will not do well. By and large, given that what our view is that the economic cycle is about to turn and the economic activities, perhaps next 4-5 years, will pick up in India, our sense is Quantum Long-Term Equity Fund should do rather well. It should not have the kind of underperformance that you saw in 2017, 18, 19. But if the environment changes, then perhaps the expectations might be very different. As of now, I'm hopeful. I think next 5 years will be a lot better.
Neeraj, did last 1.5 year make us change any major changes in the portfolio in quantum long-term?
Yeah, so I mean, given that we are value investors, and we were sitting on a bit of cash when the COVID crisis hit, we went shopping. So our portfolio, I think we added 5 new names at that point in time, between Feb and March 2020. Some of them are still in the portfolio, names which we never thought would come to the valuations that they were traded at. But cash levels essentially dropped to less than 5% at the end of March 2020. Since then, our cash levels are again inched up as valuations have gone up, and we've had to trim some of the holdings that we've had and exit some of the names. But by and large, our process remains unchanged. We buy companies where we think valuations are attractive and exit companies where we think valuations are expensive. This is the broad sort of framework that we always follow, which will continue to remain. If the markets were to go berserk and rally, and we think the underlying earnings are not justifying the valuations, you should expect us to exit companies, and perhaps cash levels might inch higher. But if markets were to crack again and give us an opportunity, we will be happy to go and buy. Our long-term thesis on India has not changed. By and large, near-term opportunities might change. So this is sort of how we behaved in the COVID crisis and how the portfolio team behaved.
So with our current portfolio, do we expect to perform with the current holdings, or will there be any cycles of underperformance, or we may have to go underperformance in the coming 3 or 4 years, not in the span of 5 or 6 years, in the coming 2 or 3 years of time?
See, right now, where the portfolio is positioned, I think we have a good portfolio. A lot of them are market leaders in their space and dominate their space. A lot of them are companies which have done really well. I don't think the portfolio will underperform if the broad economic activity picks up. Like I said, it will only underperform in an environment where economic activity is stagnant and a very select set of companies are taking the markets higher. If we don't own them, that time you might have an issue. But by and large, I don't think with the portfolio that we have, of course, names might come and go. If you think valuation is expensive, we might exit some names and some new names might give us an opportunity. That might happen. But I don't expect the portfolio to underperform if broadly the economic activity picks up in the next few months.
So another question from the same investor again, it is from Mr. Ajay. He's saying that if not underperformance, so we'll be able to catch up what we had lost at some point of time, and over what span of time?
Yeah, hopefully. So I mean, see, since inception we continue to outperform. It was only around 17, 18, 19 where we had a period of underperformance. This year again we've had outperformance, decent outperformance, and we're catching up. If this trend continues, we might be able to catch up and recoup some of those periods of underperformance. But it's very tough to forecast. You don't know how markets behave. What we know is we have a set of companies where we think valuations are comfortable and they will do well over the next 5 years. We don't look at the index to build the portfolio. We don't look at trying to, oh, this company has this weight in the index, I should have a higher rate if I want to outperform. We don't do that. The portfolio decision is stock specific. By and large, this is a company we like. We think it will do well over the next 5 years, and it's available at a valuations we think are comfortable. And we hope it will do well over the next 5 years and give better returns than the market. So hopefully we should be able to recoup some of the underperformance, but there's no guarantee. I cannot tell you when it will happen and what will happen. That's what this year we've been able to recoup some, but there is still scope to do better over the next 12 to 18 months.
So same question from the same investor, Mr. Ajay. In fact, he's thinking in the long run, when he goes ahead with quantum long-term equity fund, should he also look for a passive fund along with it? Is it?
Yeah, I mean, I did a webinar.
Or should he stick on to quantum long-term equity?
Yeah, I did a webinar, I think a month ago on active versus passive. By and large, people must know we also have a passive fund in the company, the Nifty ETF, which has been there for over a decade. And it's very easy for us to tell people to come and invest there. It's a fund that we have, but we don't recommend it because there are issues in passive investing in India. Like I said, I mean, the reason why passive investing is now coming in a big way is because last 4-5 years, most active managers have underperformed because a very select set of stocks with very large weights in the passive benchmarks have done well. Now that can turn overnight. Suddenly those 5 stocks, if they start underperforming, you'll have a long period of active fund managers outperforming passive fund managers. And in India, the benchmarks themselves undergo so much change. And every year, a large number of companies are taken out and new companies are brought in. And every time that happens, there are transaction costs for the index fund manager to rebalance and buy into those companies and sell out of companies. So it's not that low cost as people think. So I think there will be a time when passive will become mainstream in India. But at least for the next decade, I think active managers perhaps might still have a much better time. Just because of problems of corporate governance in some of these large names in the index, as well as issues of rebalancing and the churn that you see in the portfolio. My advice is to stick to active investing. If you want passive, you can have the Quantum Nifty ETF, you can invest in that. But by and large, a basket of funds where you maybe quantum fund of funds as well as the quantum long-term equity value fund, a basket of that should be able to give you better returns.
So just continuing on that question, how does a Nifty 50 mutual fund will react in a bull run or the opposite? In fact, ideally they should replicate the returns.
Yeah, so the Nifty 50 ETF is just an exact replica of Nifty 50, right? So the bull run, if the market is running higher, the Nifty 50 ETF will go higher. If the market sort of fall, the Nifty 50 ETF will fall. By and large, that is the idea of passive investing, right? You get the exact returns that the markets are getting, very close to the market returns. So in a bull run, it should give you great returns, and in a bear run, it will sort of give you not that great returns. The fund manager there doesn't have any discretion of rebalancing or trying to protect the portfolio in the market crash. He will stay invested even if he believes the market is expensive. But I think if you like passive investing, the Nifty 50 is a great way of just getting the market exposure that you want.
So Nilesh, what is the difference between an US index fund and an Indian index fund? Is there something we don't see as investors? Is there something apart from that?
The only major difference that so I know in that presentation I put out a email that Ajit had, a conversation that Ajit had with John Bogle, who's the founder of or known as the godfather of passive investing and sort of founder of Vanguard, which runs the largest ETFs in the world. The only difference there is, I mean, you have to understand the basic foundation of passive investing is to keep costs low. So the kind of churn that you see in the Indian indices, you don't see that in the Western indices. It's a very mature market, and the companies there are a lot more stable. So the portfolio churn is a lot lower, and the creation of index perhaps is a lot more sensible than what we have in India. In India, just because corporate governance there is a lot better defined, and companies there are a lot cleaner. You don't have the kind of companies, chronic capitalist companies with serious corporate governance issue with large weights in the index over there that you have in India. Of course, you had Enron and WorldCom and other such companies over there. They've cleaned up a lot. So that's sort of the worry of index passive investing in India, where corporate governance is perhaps not a criteria they focus on while creating the benchmarks. And secondly, the kind of churn that you do. And the benchmark undergoes a lot of churn, which induces the transaction cost for the index, which reduces the return for the index. These are sort of the major reasons.
So there are some sectorial or industry questions. In fact, which sector or industry do you think will be performing better in the next 1 or 3 years?
Just off the hunch, when I look at valuations and where they stand and the way the rallies panned out, I think financials have still not participated in a big way. I think perhaps that is where you might see value emerging in financials. Consumer discretionary again is a pocket which did well initially, but again is not done that well. I think that sector might do well, including sort of autos and two-wheelers. Sectors that I think perhaps investors should be slightly wary of, perhaps could be information technology, because they've had a major rally. Pharmaceuticals have had a significant rally. I think that is where you might want to be careful, including cyclicals like capital goods, where you've had a significant rally over there. They might not do that well. Just when I look at valuations internally of where sectors stand and which sectors have driven market rally so far, this is my sense of how sectors will do well. And utilities, I think, will do well. So by and large, valuation gap is very large there. A lot of them still trade at around book value, and I think at some point market will realize great value that is there in that market.
Anything you would like to comment on the banking industry and classify into both two ways: the small banks and the small banks and the large banks, how they will do?
So we have not been that big a fan of small banks in general. I think when the cycle turns, they tend to get hit a lot. Management quality, perhaps there is a slightly more suspect, where their willingness to take risk is slightly higher, which means in a down cycle you get hit. So by and large, you've stuck to large cap names, and within large caps, you've always stuck to marquee names. We don't, especially in the banking sector, we don't want to risk investing in a bank which might not be able to withstand a downturn. So I think there is still upside, very significant upside in all of those names. So just large cap private sector banks, which are run very well run, I think investors still have decent upside there, and they have not participated in the way they should have in the rally. Small banks, I think investors should be careful. I would not advise allocating too much capital.
Nilesh, what will be your cash right now in Quantum long-term equity fund, and what's the rationale for the said cash that we have?
Yeah, I think the cash right now is just under 10%. Again, we don't take a call on cash. It is stock specific. So if we've had to trim some name because valuations have gotten expensive, or we had to exit some names because valuations have gotten expensive, and we don't find alternate opportunities, and we are happy with the weights of other stocks that we have, what remains is cash. In the rally, we've had to trim some names as they got expensive. But apart from that, is the only reason cash is gone up. It's not a view on the market as such. You could have high cash levels and the markets could continue to rally. It's not something we take a call on. But that's the only rationale where we've had to trim some names, and that is why cash has gone up. There is no number that we decide while deciding cash levels in the fund.
So maybe I would frame this question for you. For this is from one of the investors. They're saying the Sensex P is around 28, and still we say that it's a great opportunity. So what do you think it will be crashing? What happens, and what will analysts come up with that if it crashes?
Yeah, so like I said, one is that trailing P number, you have to be careful because it has quarters where it got impacted by COVID. So the earnings number is suppressed. And as you have normalized earnings going forward, that P number will fall. Still doesn't mean it's cheap. You could have earnings. It's still fairly above long-term averages. The thing is, when you've had 7-8 years of down cycle, and now if you're looking at 4-5 years of up cycle, in the early phase of that up cycle, and because markets tend to factor a lot ahead of the curve, it looks like it's a very expensive market. But if you factor 2-3 years of growth in that P, when I show the forward earnings number for the index as well as for our portfolio, it is not that expensive because you have strong earnings growth coming in. So it sort of tends to mislead you in selling when you shouldn't, which is what happened in 2004-5. So 2004-5, you had a big rally. By 2005, markets started looking expensive, but the rally kept on running till 2008. So investors need to be careful, especially if the cycle is turning, to exit quickly. So in select stocks, if they're expensive, you might want to take book some profits. But by and large, I think you should remain invested. I don't think getting out of the market, unless there's a very bad third wave and there's some COVID-related event or some geopolitics event which triggers a crash. Purely, if you look at earnings outlook and liquidity outlook, I think market might continue to rally at a sedate pace, but might continue to rally higher.
So Nilesh, in earlier slides, you show how the Indian consumer was participating in the bull run. So there's also an impact of the US also. There's trillions of money that has been pumped in the market. How does it affect our Indian market?
The US Fed sets the rate of capital around the world. It is the largest exporter of capital, and the rate of interest that it sets, so people feed off, and the risk assets are priced on that. What happens if the Fed rate is 3%? That is a hurdle rate for people to invest in the US market, and they want a surplus return on that. And then above that, they would want a higher return on riskier assets, including assets like India. If that 3% falls to 1%, suddenly the entire curve moves lower. So instead of demanding a 15% return from an equity market like India, you're happy with a 10% return because the US Fed rate is so low. So it sort of encourages risky behavior in the market, and assets get priced upwards, especially inflation-linked assets get priced upwards in such an environment. So that is how sort of it influences behavior, and that is what you've seen since the Lehman collapse. The amount of money that is pumped in around the world has just elevated asset prices around the world. And I don't think, at least for the next few years, you would have a period where central bankers pull out liquidity. I think they will continue to remain, have easy liquidity, and that means asset prices or equity prices around the world will remain elevated. I don't see it affecting equity prices in the near term, or at least bringing it down, pulling out of liquidity.
Anish, what would you like to advise to people when you say institutional investors sitting on the sideline and the retail investors putting in money? Normally, in these cases, they do have one hand.
It happened around 2008 at the top, where a lot of retail money was coming in and on their hand. Institutional money, I mean, you have to wait and see. Mutual fund flows, the informed investor is exited, but now again you're seeing a resurgence in flows in mutual funds. I mean, my only point is, if there is an earnings upcycle for next 4 or 5 years, I don't think we have reached the peak of the market today. I think you might continue to rise. That is my point. I think if liquidity is easy and if earnings continue to rise, and I think next 4 or 5 years you might have an upcycle after 7-8 years of down cycle, I think it's unlikely equity markets will fall or give you bad returns or weak negative returns. You might have short periods of correction or something. But unless the economic cycle again is turning downwards, where companies are not that interested to set up new capacity or not looking to expand, and you had a strong impact on consumption demand, I don't think equity markets are going to fall. Again, you have to understand the big tailwind for India is you have a 20-year low in interest rates, which triggers a lot of things. That means real estate prices now become a lot more affordable for people to buy. It means infrastructure projects suddenly look a lot more viable. So at 9-10%, people are not keen to fund projects, but at 6-7%, suddenly infrastructure projects become viable. And if that cycle kicks off, suddenly you have demand coming back in a big way for commodities, for bank credit demand, and other things, which again creates employment and drives another leg cycle. So I think there are sort of, you can say, underlying factors in place to kickstart a new upcycle. And in that environment, I just don't see a significant correction happening.
Given all these scenarios, Nilesh, what would you advise our investors? They want to ask whether they should invest a lump sum, they should start an SIP, or they should park in their money into liquid fund and start their investments. So what will be your advice?
SIP remains the best strategy always. Just averages all your long-term variations in return. For investors who've not had an SIP and now have lump sum money available, I think for them, they perhaps need to stagger their investments. And then you might have some correction in the market of 5-10%. You might allocate the other 25% at that point in time. So maybe 75% you start with, and the balance 25. But I don't think not staying invested in equity is the right strategy right now. I think you might want to stay invested with the understanding that you might have to face a 10-15% correction anytime. If that happens, bad luck. But if it doesn't happen, I think equity markets will continue to rally.
So another question on quantum long-term equity fund. Why does quantum long-term equity fund why doesn't it invest into overseas markets or like it peers?
Yes, I mean, any product that we launch, we need to have a track record internally. We study it a lot and look whether it makes sense to offer that product. So quantum long-term equity fund, when we launched, it was always an India focus fund. There's no description of we will be investing in overseas investments. This question of overseas investments has come especially in the last 5-6 years and in the last decade. So the last decade, developed markets have done a lot better than the emerging markets. But if you look at the decade before that, it was the emerging markets, including India, which has done a lot better than developed markets. If you look at periods like 2003 till date, India has outperformed by a very large margin. You look at any benchmark from the developed world. So, I mean, we essentially you have to understand money will flow to places where growth is the fastest. I think India, at nominal GDP growth of 12-13%, will have a fair share of companies which are growing fastest. I expect flows to come to India. And I expect Indian markets to do a lot better than developed markets. Barring periods like you had over the last 5-6 years where developed markets did well, which is where you're seeing this rush to invest in developed markets. I think over longer terms, 15-20 years, I think Indian markets will do well. But we again internally do not have any team which invests overseas. We have always invested in India and focused on India. And this is a market we understand and companies we understand. And there is no plans to launch any international product.
Nilesh, you mentioned about our 12-80-20 strategy. So if you can just reiterate it, there's a question around it also, that how do fixed income products fix in it?
Yeah, I mean, if that strategy is essentially for a long-term investor, and if you're a long-term investor, fixed income is not a product. They will barely give you returns above inflation. So we've never advocated for retail investors the quantum dynamic bond fund. Because I don't think people understand how it works, especially that it can give you negative returns in periods where interest rates rise. And secondly, for long periods of time, equity remains the best bet. I don't think debt will even figure close to the kind of returns that you can get in equity. So the only place that debt figures in that 12-80-20 strategy is that 12 months of emergency corpus you can put in your liquid fund. But by and large, for long-term investors, we've never advocated investing in debt.
Sunesh, what's the recommendation on ESG funds? Is there a duration that you should hold for how long an ESG fund?
Yeah, I mean, ESG is something we've been working on for last 5-6 years now. So you must be aware, we advise a lot of foreign investors, especially the parent manages a large FII portfolio. And we saw this trend emerging 5-6 years ago, where a lot of the pensions and sovereign funds were demanding that the companies that they invest in should be ESG compliant. And I think over the last 5-6 years, that trend has just accelerated. It has not reduced. By and large, over the next decade, companies that are not ESG compliant and do not follow good ESG norms will struggle to attract capital, and companies that are ESG compliant and follow the best governance norms will get most of the capital allocated, especially from the Western world, be it Europe or Canada and US. In that environment, I think the ESG portfolio will do really well. I think they will attract a lot better flows and their valuations will get re-rated compared to companies that are not following ESG norms. So, but given that that product is still new and doesn't have a long-term track record, hence we advise a 15% allocation there. but we expect it to give as good a returns as quantum long-term equity value fund for the next decade. I don't think that the companies there are bad. They're best in class companies, and I think more and more capital will get allocated to that space.
Right. Nilesh, are there any stop loss orders that we have in our funds, in all our funds, equity funds?
We don't have a stop loss, but we have a process in place. So essentially, when we are trying to buy companies, especially in a value style, some of the times we are buying into companies where the news is not great. We think currently the news is not great, but next 5 years it'll improve. That is when we buy into the company. So after we buy, the companies can continue to fall. What we do is, if the company has fallen 20% below our cost, the entire portfolio team as well as the analysts will go and meet the company again, recheck our assumptions, and then take a call whether to allocate more into that company. If you think the market is mispricing, we will be happy to add more, barring some cost to NAV limits that we set for companies. If it falls another 20% from that level, that is when we decide that this is a stop loss and we will exit the company irrespective of what the outlook is. But that fall has to be because of company specific reasons. If it's like a correction driven by COVID or some global macro shock, then we will not exit. But if it's some company specific issue and if it falls another 20% after the first 20% fall, then at some point we have to realize perhaps our research is not factoring what it should be factoring, and we will exit that company. This is the process we put in place to follow, and by and large, right now we are following that process.
Nilesh, earlier you said that we can keep a watch due to fiscal season. The cases may rise up again. But if the cases in another country, if suppose in US, if it starts increasing, do you think they will have an impact on the Indian market in the coming 3 or 4 months of time? There is a question from Mr. Dipankar.
Yeah, it will have some impact where exporters might be favored negatively because these markets might shut down, and so the export business might get hit. So that particular pocket of companies might get hit. But broadly in India, if the India unlock progresses smoothly and there is no third wave, I doubt you will have a big market correction. I think the markets will continue to rally.
Do you see this earnings momentum continuing for months, years? What's your view on that?
Yeah, our sense is it's sort of a new upcycle in corporate earnings. I think it might, typical business cycles tend to be for 4-5 years. I think you might have a 4-5 year of earnings upcycle. And perhaps that is how investors should view this.
Okay. So this is a question from Mr. Ajay Srinivasan. Is there an analysis apart from the Reliance run-up? Apart from the Reliance run-up, you did mention that what portfolio changes or what we were looking at. So what's your view on that?
This is regarding our periods where we underperformed. Is that?
Yeah.
Okay. We actually did a very detailed analysis and we had actually done a presentation as well. So one broad reason which I pointed out, there was a concentrated rally in the market with companies that we would never buy because of corporate downstream did well, and very few set of stocks. When I looked at the numbers, I think 4 stocks contributed 60% of the rally in the markets. The other thing was that we were early in buying into some financials. So if you remember, financials after the IL&FS debacle took a big hit and their valuations derated, especially in the NBFC pack. And we added some NBFCs into the portfolio. They had corrected 50-60%. But after we added them, they again corrected another 30-40%. In the period where the markets were moving higher because of some select names, our portfolio was suffering because of some of these NBFC names. That is also what hurt us. Of course, now they've done a lot better over the last 12 to 18 months. But in that period of 2018 and 19, they hurt us a lot. And of course, we added some names where we thought there was a corporate governance turnaround happening. And these companies did not do that well, and we had to exit those names. So these were sort of the 3 broad reasons that we could figure out which hurt our performance in that period.
So Nilesh, also more something on the sectoral part. Do you see the IT and the digital sectors leading the market in the next few years? Because as you see the economy or companies becoming more digitalized.
Yeah, I mean, I think for the next few years, the growth will remain robust. I mean, if you remember 2000, 15 to probably 2020, IT sector was written off. It was saying that the IT sector is dead, they will not grow, they will become dividend yield stocks. I think all that has changed after COVID hit because they realized company spend on digital is going to go up a lot. And you're seeing that where they now are getting back to the growth that they were doing before 2015. Perhaps it might last for 3-4 years. You have a new strong upcycle. The point is, a lot of it is getting already factored in the price. You have to be careful. Their valuations are no longer what they were before March 2020. They are now getting back to valuations that they were pre-2015. And so perhaps they might give you positive returns, but not the kind of returns that you saw in 2020. And they might underperform some of the other sectors where valuations are a bit attractive. So my sense is, as a sector, they will do well, but perhaps as an investment, they might lag some of the other sectors in the
market. Which are the top three segment do you see doing really well in the coming years? Top three, and what's your
top three sectors?
Top three segments which you see will be really doing well in the coming 3 years of time.
So I'm assuming segments. I mean sectors,
yeah.
Right?
Sectors.
Yeah, so like I said, I think financials will do really well. I think they've not participated in the way that the other sectors have had. I think once the NPA problem is solved, and most of them are a lot cleaner now, and credit growth picks up, I think you might see them catching up. I think utilities might participate in the rally. They are still sort of deep value right now. I think as the electricity demand picks up and growth improves, just because of where valuations are in that bucket, they might do a lot better. I think consumer discretionary space still has some value left. I think as unlock happens, as people flock to hotels and buy 2-wheelers and 4-wheelers, you might have some valuation upside there. So again, this is stock returns perspective. Sectors doing well could be very different. Underlying economic activity in sectors could be very different.
So there's a question also on tax saving fund, and why tax saving fund is unable to beat the benchmark. It's around 5 years of time.
Yeah, because of, the tax saving fund is an exact replica of quantum long-term equity value fund. The portfolio is identical. With quantum long-term equity fund, if you go back 5 years, 5-year track record is not that great because of 2017, 18, 19, where we underperformed by a large margin because of reasons that are highlighted just very concentrated rally in the market, wrong stocks or early buying into stocks. So that is what has pulled down our outperformance, including the tax saving fund. But like I said, last 1 year has been a lot better, and hopefully next 3-4 years should be a lot better for that strategy, given that value style might come back.
Yeah. So there's a question from investors going forward. Maximum companies are to be ESG compliant. So will there be more of a difference between quantum long-term equity fund and ESG fund? So will they have a distinction between them?
Yeah, the only difference and major difference, I expect even quantum long-term value fund will only invest in companies that are ESG compliant. The only major difference is valuations. The ESG team invests purely based on ESG score. They don't care about valuations. While long-term equity value funds, primary consideration is valuation. We will not buy into companies which we think are expensive. So that is where the differentiation will come, and that is where portfolio would not be similar. It should be very different. But if a great company is available at decent valuation, I expect both the funds to hold that company.
So this would be also able to comment on what will be the dividend yield on long-term equity fund?
I don't know if that slide has the dividend yield. Let me just check. Put out the yield. Yeah, so dividend yield is about 1.4% for QLT.
Yeah. So here's a question from Mr. Suresh. There are around 3 questions. The first one being, does it make sense to switch from long-term equity fund to quantum ESG fund for long-term?
I don't know whether the return profile will be very different. I think it's better to have a broad strategy and not try to figure out which fund in the quantum family is going to do well. I think by and large, each fund represents different characteristics. I expect the ESG fund to behave very differently compared to value funds. So when we do well, perhaps they might not do that well, and vice versa. So in your portfolio, perhaps you need both, not just one, but you can split your allocation there. You might want to keep half here and half there. And like I said, majority should be in the fund of funds, not in either of these funds, because it represents a pool of diversified equity funds which are not quantum, which are outside of the quantum fund. Just these three funds should actually complete your basket. 70% in quantum equity fund of funds, 15% in long-term equity value fund, and another 15% in ESG fund.
Okay. Yeah. So also can be quantum equity fund of fund be used for a long-term saving, such as a retirement along with an ESG value fund? I think you answered that in our asset allocation now. So if you can just reiterate that again.
Yeah, so if you're early in your career and you have a long headway to go, you should allocate to quantum long-term equity value fund. It is essentially a wealth builder. Over a period of time, it will do well. But as you get closer to retirement, you reach your corpus and you don't, again, it's an equity fund, so it is a high risk category. You want to start gradually moving away from that to perhaps a multi-asset fund, which has a much better allocation to fixed income and equity. So that if the markets were to crack, it doesn't impact you that much. You don't want to, late in life, you don't want to receive a shock where you have your savings are wiped out because of market crash. So early on in your career, you allocate most of your money to equity funds, including quantum equity value fund. And as you get closer to retirement, start switching that money away from these equity funds to perhaps a multi-asset fund to reduce your risk exposure and to protect your corpus.
So there is a question from Mr. Sankar. There has been no change in fund of fund. Means there are no funds that has been changed. So does it mean that all funds in the fund of fund are doing very well? I think we did have a change in fund of fund recently.
Yeah, I think Chirag will be much better person to answer. But what I know of Chirag and what strategy is following, they are looking at funds from a long-term perspective, not 6 months, 1 year. Long-term characteristics of funds don't change overnight. It perhaps takes a while for the long-term characteristics to change. And once it does change, they replace it. I think even this year they've replaced fund, and I think they've expanded the basket of funds that they want to invest in from, I think, 7 funds to 9 funds. So there are changes underway, but by and large, 1 year of underperformance will not automatically lead to a fund being thrown out, because again, funds go through cycle, and there's a reason why they've invested in that fund. And they're looking at long-term characteristics, not 6 months and 1 year characteristics to invest. So you will not have the kind of churn that you see in the fund of fund that they're churning quite regularly. It will be gradual churn.
Yeah. So I think that's the questions from that's all questions from our participants and investors today. Yeah. If there are any more questions, we will be surely happy to take it. You can always write to us. Yeah. I would like to thank you, all of you, for giving your time. Thanks, Nilesh, for the presentation and for the question, for the answers that you have given to me. Any questions you people, if anybody thinks that missed out, or if you want to ask, you can please write to us. Yeah. So thanks a lot, Nilesh. Thanks all of you for the questions, for giving your time. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Sandeep, and you've been a wonderful host. And happy to answer any questions that investors have. And I hope I've been able to solve some doubts for everyone. Thank you so much.
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.